So with most people now here, I'd like to welcome you all to London Alternative Photography Collective's 2021 Symposium. Although it's sad in some ways not to be able to hold this event in person, it's positive in so many others. And I'm delighted to have such an international panel of speakers and audience joining me today. My name's Hannah Fletcher, and I'm one of the co-directors of London Alternative Photography Collective. This symposium is supported by Arts Council England as part of the Sustainable Darkroom. The Sustainable Darkroom is an initiative that I began in 2019 to equip cultural practitioners with new skills and knowledge to develop an environmentally friendly darkroom photographic practice, taking its form in publications, residencies, workshops, training sessions, and mentoring sessions and talks. The project is really designed to build collective power and think about how we can rethink the current photographic industry. I want to encourage and empower you as makers, as thinkers, as doers, to have the knowledge and awareness of the materials and processes you're using, to understand the relationship between the things we encounter and the planet we live on. The Sustainable Darkroom is now an international network designed to educate, to learn through sharing and collaborative research, to encourage mistakes to be made and ideas to be tested. With each new residency, workshop, talk or event, we get a little bit closer to understanding the word sustainable and its relationship with all aspects of the photographic industry and beyond. So amongst our other events and contributing to our talks and residencies have been a number of filmmakers. I think that, Super 8 and 16mm have a lot in common with the photographic film, especially when you break them down to their material properties, the physicality of hand processing, loading and shooting. Analog photographers and analog filmmakers kind of have both succumbed to the tactility of the medium, drawn in by the materiality and its many personalities. Today, we're joined by a number of experts in the film industry whom all have a keen interest in environmental approaches to working with the medium. Our first two speakers are General Trigon and Ricardo Leite. General Trigon has been involved with the Sustainable Darkroom for the past 8 months. His breadth of knowledge and experimentation in making plant-based developers never ceases to leave me in awe. General Trigon runs a film lab in Mexico called Curioso Lab. It's a space for photochemical exploration, specializing in cinematography. His research focuses on non-traditional development processes. Most recently, he's been working on an 100% homemade film developer for black and white film. This is based on clementine peels, homemade potash, and he has labeled it as Simple Developer. The performance and possibilities of this developer on 16mm and 35mm film. Next, we will hear from Ricardo Leite. Ricardo is a Portuguese film director working mainly in experimental and documentary genres. He's one of the early pioneers of research into plant-based developers. Ricardo has been working in biodegradable and non-toxic chemistry processes since 2012 and presented his hydrogen peroxide, citric acid, bleach and reversal cathanol process at the TIE Festival in Colorado in 2013. The majority of his analog films are hand-developed in his laboratory. General Trigon and Ricardo are also both members of Film Labs Network, a group of artist-run film labs across Europe, America, and Asia. You can check out more on this and other film labs connected via filmlabs.org. So with that, I will now hand over to General Trigon.
Thank you. And hello to everyone. I'm pleased to be here. So many nice faces there. Uh, well, I'm going to start saying that my approach to experimental filmmaking comes more from the technical side, um, from the lab side. I start processing when I was a teenager, like shooting 35 in black and white. And I remember back then I felt quite uncomfortable about the way we discard our chemicals from the processing. And back then I used D66, no Kodak packages, and I feel awkward because I need to prepare a full gallon of chemistry. I don't process too much back then, so the developer goes bad before I use it all. So I start to think many years ago about a better way to work in the lab, to have a better eco practice. Even that back then I never realized that I was thinking of an eco practice. But one thing that I learned back then, I'm going to share my screen. One thing that I learned back then is that one of the easiest way of discarding our chemicals is putting in a PET container and leave that the air, sun, and the ambient do the rest. You know, this is a PET container of 10 liters of waste chemicals, and in 5 months, it was reduced almost to nothing. So that made me think a lot that sometimes the solutions are quite easy and we tend to make it complicated. So I start to read a lot on, especially in old books, and I find that there are several ways to do the lab work in a more eco way that people since the beginning of the photography are doing. But at some point in history, we forgot about that. You know? For example, at some point in photo history, someone decided that hydroquinone and metol is the way to go. And we forgot about many other developer agents that are really good. One of those is ascorbic acid that I'm gonna start talking about it, and it's the one I'm working on it. So I go to film school, I shot a lot, Super 8, 35, and I process a lot during film school for me and for my friends. That's me in the middle, like 25 years ago. And I was reading a handbook of how to treat chemical wastes. And the first pages, it says, pollution prevention is simply not making the waste in the first place. And I say, yeah, that's quite easy, but it's possible. It's quite, if you want to process, can you not make the pollution? Can you not make the developer that's going to be waste later? So I understand that it means do what you can to reduce the amount and toxicity of the pollution we generate. And then I said my 5 lab rules that are working with me, I think like for the last 10 years, is don't buy more than is needed, use the less toxic product available, reuse and regenerate the solution as much as it can be done, recycle, and maintain in good shape and working order the gear and the lab. So I set those 5 rules. I try to follow each one as much as I can, and they work. I understand that the way to go, the way to work in a more sustainable way, in a more eco way in the lab, is to produce my own chemistry, because I can buy only when it's needed. If I buy a pack of pre-packaged Kodak developer, I need to prepare a full gallon of chemistry. And what happens if I don't use it all? Well, I'm generating a waste that is not used. So with these simple rules, my lab goes in a more eco way since the beginning. So then, uh, during my research, I found some writings by Charles Bills, who prepared a developer using dehydrated lemons, and he claimed that faint images appear on the photographic emulsion. That was during the 30s. In 31, Charles Bills said that he processed film using lemons. And I tried to reproduce his method, and that is what I got. The left side is the negative as it comes from the developer tank. It's faint, as, as Bill says, and when you push it in the scanner, you got some images. That was like, I think a year ago, so I decided to keep on working with ascorbic acid as my main developer for all my practice. Based on that, ascorbic acid it's really low in toxicity, it's really cheap, it's really easy to find, and it can be biodegraded really easily. And so I start test after test, okay? Because as Levinson said, the only way of deciding the answer to a practical problem in photographic chemistry is to try and see. Photographic emulsions are such complex things that it's impossible to predict with certainty what will happen under given condition merely by working in theory. That extract is from Grant Hayes' book, and I was reading that book. I was chatting a lot with members from different forums and Facebook groups, and I understand that the only way to prove that it can be possible to have an experimental developer that works like a commercial developer is to test, test, and test. So I start testing like almost every day. I waste almost like 1,000 feet of 16 millimeter testing, but it's working. So I made it simple. I call it simple because it's really simple to make the developer. It's just water, soda, and ascorbic acid. Well, ascorbic acid is a developer agent that needs high alkaline solutions to work. It's slow starting but produces low foam, honest grain, and increases film speed in combination with sodium sulfide. It's cheap and very low in toxicity. That is like the resume of what I just said. And ventilation and other control are second benefits for the darkroom user. Ascorbic acid used as the only developer agent in the solution stain the negative. Okay, so it's like if he tints the negative, but it performs differently. And with the pyro developer, a color stain builds up in the proportion of the silver content of the film. So you're gonna see the strips in the next slides, but when you see the film coming out of the tank, you're gonna see like orange or deep yellow. Okay, that is sometimes people don't like it, but people who, for example, do contact printing for cyanotype, platinum, palladium, stuff like that, we're gonna find this really useful because stain also block UV light, so it make a better print. So a stain developer is interesting. So I found that it's really, well, I like the way it works. It's just a matter of taste. You need to try and see. Mm, it's all it's not only stain, it's called an infectious developer, meaning that it's a developer based upon a low or non-sulfide or bisulfide with just one developer agent and high alkalinity, encourage infectious development. means that exposed developer silver iodide crystals collide with an exposed silver iodide crystals, causing them to also reduce. The lack of sodium sulfite or bisulfite in this developer makes that the development process is not even. So it's really interesting to see how it's performed. You need to try and see. It's difficult to express in words the difference between a non-infectious and an infectious developer. But it's funny that it's infectious because I was reading the Timothy Morton in this book is called, I had the name here, sorry. But I forget all. Well, let's see, let's talk about strips. This is 16 millimeters processed in simple developer. It's just water, sodium carbonate, and ascorbic acid. As you can see on the yellow or orange, I'm colorblind, so it's yellow or orange. This is a stain developer, it's tinted. When you pass it to black and white, you can see that it's performing really good. And if you think that it's just three components, water, ascorbic acid, and soda, it's really cheap, it's really easy to make it. And for me, one of the things that is more important is that to make a developer that is available almost everywhere. Because cameras and film could fly, you could buy online a camera or you can buy online a film and will reach you wherever you are. But some countries, like almost all Latin America, custom regulations don't leave that chemistry goes into the country. So you need to make your own chemistry. And this is a chemistry that is easy really to make. It works good and could help people to shoot and process wherever you are. This is the process of a stain from the negative to the positive in Photoshop and then turn to black and white, just to show how it is performing. Another thing that I really like about the stain properties of the simple developer is that when you scan in color and you play with the color range of each channel, it's like it has, I call it color illusion because it's not color, but you see it's like a bad processed color stock, right? And what amazed me more is that when you process color film, this is a color film, when you process color film with simple developer, it's not color, again, it's just color illusion. But when you scan in color, it seems like there are color there. Okay? So I'm still working on it. I'm still trying every different stock I can get. But I think it's a really good way to process in a cheap way, in an eco way, and in almost every place in the world. And because it's just water, soda, and ascorbic acid, I start trying to replace the components, okay? So I replace sodium carbonate powder by making potash. That's calcium carbonate from wood ash. And so I make my own potash and process, and it's working good. I call it simple Cayman because I extract the potash experiment from the Cayman chemistry book. And then I say, okay, I already potash. Let's try to replace the sodium, the ascorbic acid. So I start reading, and clementine peel powder, the tangerines, have a lot of ascorbic acid in it. So I replace the ascorbic acid with clementine peel powder. It takes 2 hours to process that, okay? But as you can see, the film is pretty good, and when you pass it to black and white and play a little with the levels, you can have a decent image. So that's what I am working on. Simple is, I prepare it in that way. There's not one only formula. I have ratios of things that I'm playing with. Simple is water, soda in that ratio from 20 to 40 grams in half a liter water, and from 2 to 10 grams of ascorbic acid. Okay, if you play with clementine peel powder or with soda, you're gonna need to add more because they're not as powerful as powder chemistry, but they work. Times go from 12 to 18 minutes at 26 degrees Celsius with those components. If you use potash and clementine peel powder, as I said, it's like 2 hours of film processing. It's really good for playing and experiment. It's really good for workshops or for kids that can process with non-toxic chemistry. They can even put your hands in it. And that's simple. That's the thing I'm working on since a long time. And I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much, General Trigon. That was really, I think, a great introduction to kind of all the different things which are going to follow, and a really, yeah, like a great way to introduce the chemistry of the subject. I can see kind of questions already flooding in, but we're going to save all the questions until the end. So for now, we're going to hand over to Ricardo.
First of all, I'm very happy to be in the presence of so many other alchemists. I can call you fellow alchemists, like Dougie. I'm seeing Adrian and Philip and others. And Trigon also, I never met you, but well, Dougie, I never met you in person, but we talk sometimes in internet. Yeah, well, my story isn't so different from Trigon. Is I started to work in a cinema in Super 8 in school, and I started to process film also at my home in 1999, around 1999, 1998, some years ago. And then the interest, well, but I always used conventional chemistry processing until roughly 2012, maybe it was like 2011, maybe. I started, because I started to experiment. My main concern was not to process negative, but to process reversal film, because I've always done Super 8 and 16 millimeter in reversal, because I was always interested in projecting my images, because I didn't have I still don't have a printer, so my lab doesn't have well, I have a printer, but it's not working. I need someone like Richard or Diane to make it to visit my lab and put it working, because I'm not good with mechanical things sometimes. Well, so back to the, well, back in 2012, I felt the need to find, because I was worried about using, especially the bleach, using the potassium dichromate base bleach. That uses also sulfuric acid, but mainly because of potassium dichromate, because it's really highly toxic, and it's been a subject in so many discussions for a long time, and it was really starting to worry me, because even though I used masks and in my practice. Potassium dichromate it's really dangerous. If it goes airborne, it can go in your hair. It can easily can go inside of you, and you can have problems with it because it's really nasty. If you check for the ones that don't know, potassium dichromate, it's really dangerous. So my main concern was to work on a way to not only to find a developer, biodegradable developer, but also a bleach that could also be safe to use together with it. So that's why I was really working on trying to find a way, and finally in 2012 in the final, and then in 2013 I presented the bleach in Colorado, like you said, and I was happy. I can share. I have a small article here. Trying to share my screen because I have some. Well, this is an article I wrote about. Talking about some historical parts of it. I talk about Dr. Scott because Dr. Scott Williams was really a big help in all this process, because he started the research on cathanol and back in 1995 in RIT in Rochester. I had the opportunity to meet him in 2016. And I even shot a small film about and developed it in cathanol with them, talking about the whole invention, the whole discovery of cathanol. So here I talk about many other. There are so many plants and seeds and even flowers that can be used in the processing film. I tried all these and others. Hyacinth was a interesting discovery because it's a flower and my interest on it was that hyacinth contains hydroquinone, so it's very interesting to find. Suddenly you start to research. You start to research on plants and on flowers, and you suddenly discover that many things that you didn't know that could be used on processing. So okay, now I talk about ascorbic acid. Of course, that's one of the main developing agents I use, like Trigon and many others here, like Dougie, like Andy and others. Then here in this article I talk about the way I focus on finding the new developing agents. I try to look at the molecular resemblance between different developing agents. We can see like catechol, like it's present on coffee. It's present on it's really strong on spearmint. I really like spearmint developer using spearmint as a developing agent because it's really easy to find. It's I can pick it up next to my home. I have a park and I can just pick some spearmint and boil it and use it, and it's really rich on catechol. It's very interesting because you don't. Well, I use coffee a lot because coffee is easy. It's already broken. You can. I use diluted coffee, so it's really fast. But spearmint is also really interesting because it's well, you can grow it. I had a small project that I took also when I was in an artistic residency at Lift in Toronto, that was building a photographic garden, so you could plant plants that or flowers. I also planted hyacinths there. And, well, this photographic garden project was I did a couple of photographic gardens in Porto Fine Arts School and then other places, Lift and other places where you can grow plants. I like that idea that you can grow a garden with plants that you can use for processing. Like I planted spearmint, I planted thyme, because thyme is really interesting because the developing agent on thyme, it's mainly thymol, the molecule that, and thyme works really well together with spearmint. They blend together really in a very interesting way.
Ricardo, I was just wondering if you could briefly explain to everyone what role the plants play in the developing process, because earlier we heard from General Trigon about the role of the ascorbic acid and the alkalinity of the potash, but we haven't really actually heard what role then the plant is kind of doing in this.
Yeah, well, the main concern is to oxidize silver. You must find my main concern when I'm looking for a developing agent is to find a plant or a seed or a flower that has components on it that can act on silver, so it can oxidize silver, so it can make the image. So what happens is all these developing agents, they work as a oxidizer. They act on silver in a very similar way, although some of them, you look at them, ascorbic acid is like an alien in the middle of these other substances, if you look at the molecular shape of it. But it works in a very similar way. But the other ones, if you look at catechol, for example, it's present on spearmint, oregano, and others. It's very similar to hydroquinone, that it's a popular conventional developer, that used it's been used in the industry for years and years. It's one of the most popular developing agents. So the thing is, what they do is they act on silver, but they act on different ways. It depends on the, like you said, on the each property of each developing agent. I don't use the same. I don't use the same amount of sodium carbonate. I use sodium carbonate or bicarbonate to increase the pH, because the silver only gets the silver in the film only gets oxidized if the alkalinity it's around above 9 pH 9, between 9 and the maximum should be 13, but the best is to work between 9 and 11. So it's most optimal pH value to work with. So with coffee and spearmint, I use different dosages of sodium carbonate. Because spearmint is not so acid as coffee. That changes things, because if you increase alkalinity, if you put a higher dose of sodium carbonate, the developing agent becomes faster also. So sometimes the spearmint developer, it's slower. It acts slower than the cathanol. So some of you know this very well. You tried all this and many other plants that they change, the time changed, the process changed. And there are even plants, I tried some other plants that you don't even have to add accelerator. You don't even have to add sodium carbonate or potash or whatever, because they already work. They're already alkaline enough, and they work without the need of it. So it's a matter of searching for the right, and then the one that you like more to work. I really like to work with spearmint and thyme. I find it really interesting. Well, then I maybe I should talk a little bit about the bleach. Well, how that started. My first test, I came up with. I started to work with hydrogen peroxide because I found a Kodak patent from 1997 that was a little bit more complex. I tried to simplify this version and take out the phthalic acid and sodium hydroxide and silver nitrate, and I started. My first test was with photo. Actually, I actually, it's a funny story. I started to do a lot of more photography when I started to work with biodegradable chemistry, because it was easier to test. So, and the funny part is that I started to photograph a lot after that. So this was one of my first tests in 2012, maybe, I don't know. This was used with no stabilizers, just Fomapan, developed with a normal developer. I started to test the bleach first with a normal developer, D19. Then I started, this was one of the second version, not the second, but I used this phthalic acid, still with D19. Phthalic acid as a stabilizer with hydrogen peroxide, so it looks a little bit more normal. The image, there's no big blisters. There's no stains on it, but still it was. I was using phthalic acid that I didn't like it because it wasn't readily available. It has some toxicity, so I didn't like it. So I tried to find something that could substitute the phthalic acid. So I went to citric acid. I don't know. Yes, this is some slide films I made in the Colorado during the workshop. I used lime juice there, but this was already processed with cathanol. This is always Fomapan reversal film was I used it a lot because it was cheap and easy to find, and it works similarly to 16 millimeter. It's the same emulsion actually. Fomapan does the same emulsion for a slide film, 35 slide film and 16. So here I use the cathanol and I bleached it with hydrogen peroxide and lime juice. You can see some blisters here. That comes with that comes with things that come with it. It's not the same as a conventional bleach, of course. There's always some stains. There's always something that. This is my son years ago. Some slide film, cathanol, and I bleached with hydrogen peroxide and vinegar. That's why it got some yellow tint. This is actually the same. I have some slides here. It's actually the same. The color that comes, it's natural. It's not. I can show you the slide here. It just comes out of the of the tank like this. It's not like, let me try to show you. You can, I think you can see that there's, well, you don't see so much color there, but it's there. It's not perfect black and white. This is some slides also from Cafanol slides. So this is not added in Photoshop. This is really there. So, but it's fun. I think it's interesting, this yellowish and this sepia toning. You know. So here I have some my formula. What I do, I can then send this to you. Well, many of you know the process. You know how it works. This was one of my first tests with spearmint, but this is negative. This was scanned, but then I made a slide film with spearmint too. I have some, I can show you some tests here. And it works pretty well also, slide film with I can show you like this also. This is spearmint and time developer with, well, this is I use, sometimes I use a grayscale so I can test if the developers is working properly. And well, for fixer, I think Esther was, for fixer, I still use sodium thiosulfate because it wasn't always it wasn't a big, it wasn't so important for me to use something different because sodium thiosulfate is already so low toxic. Some people use salt. They use high concentrations of salt to fix the film. But I talk about it here, but I normally don't use it because normally it takes a long time to fix. So I just use sodium thiosulfate. Here I talk about the things. I don't think is. Oh, this is some accidents I got sometimes with hydrogen peroxide bleach. Sometimes there's contamination. Sometimes there's and then this happens. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it's not so funny. When you really want to clean images. Well, here I have some formulas I used. So then some different variations of hydrogen peroxide bleaches. And then I have here some lists of plants that I had. I didn't test all of them, but I test some of them where you can find some of them having hydroquinone. Some I talk about hyacinth. I used hyacinth, but there's many others like oregano. And the place where you can find the place where you can take the substance you want in oregano is in the plant and in the shoot. And hyacinth is in the flower. It's not on the leaves. It's really the flower. What it's really interesting. Then you have many others, fruits, but in blackberry, for example, it's on the leaf. It's not a fruit in itself. So then I talk about catechol. Talk about bearberries. There's a big list. You can. Oh, this is a frame of some footage of 16mm. Well, and this is it. So I can also show you some sample of. When I was hearing Trigon talking about the importance of biodegradable process, I remember about one of the first photographic process that was invented. And I remember about Mary Somersville antotypes. Again, there was a time when, well, still today, but now less, when some people say that it was John Herschel that invented antotype, but it wasn't a man, it was a woman, it was Mary Somersville. And it's actually one example of how this is not so crazy what we are doing, working with plants and film. And so it's not new what we're doing, but we are reinventing the process, but it's still interesting. So I have a small, I have one of my first tests is this one. This is 60 mil processed with cathanol and lemon bleach. That's why this is so messy here. But it's kind of interesting, I think.
Few comments, someone commenting about lavender and using the flower. So Kathy says that she developed 16mm with lavender, but only uses the flower.
Yes.
Are the leaves also suitable when they're dormant? She's asking.
Well, I don't know all of them, but I use, there is a database on the internet. It's called, it's very useful. It's a big database I use normally when I want to find, I can give you the links. I have it somewhere. It's phyto something. It's a database I use many times. So when I want to find some specific plant or flower from some place, and normally I go there to find other plants when I'm somewhere else where I can't find spearmint or other plants. So I use this database. So I'm sure that there are many other flowers around it that can be used in other plants. Yes.
And then we've got another question from Imagica Lab asking whether the plants need to be kept in a certain condition and whether they kind of degrade, and does this affect it? I guess it's a good question whether they degrade kind of once the developer's made, and they're asking kind of how to avoid the degradation.
Yeah, that's the tricky point. Not normally, from my experience, most of plant developers they lose effect really fast. The one that showed more shelf life for me personally was cathanol. I could use cathanol for more than once with nice results, but normally the others, the spearmint developer normally gave me some problems because there are oils on aromatics, and the oils tend to separate, and they tend to create a kind of a substance that then makes the developer and then it oxidates. They oxidize really fast because they are plants. They are natural. So, but cathanol was it's definitely the one that offers a bigger shelf life for me usually.
Yeah. General Trigon, I know you've done quite a few tests on kind of using developers multiple times. I wondered if you wanted to say anything on that.
Yeah, first, is Phenol Explorer the web page you're talking about, Ricardo?
What?
Phenol Explorer?
No, it's phyto something. But I have the link somewhere. Okay. I didn't.
Because I use Phenol Explorer, I just put it into the chat. It's like a big database of phenolic content and all the chemical properties of the phenols and flavonoids and tannin, all the stuff.
Yeah.
I try many plants also, and yes, as Ricardo says, shelf life is a problem, because they tend to oxidize really fast. What I do is I extract and I put it in the freezer. So
oh yes, of course. Oh yes, that's just, yeah, that's the way. Yeah, I forgot. I also do that. I boil, and then I put it in the fridge. Yes.
so that
But
way, with seasonal plants, you would have your seasonal developer of the year. So
what?
with season plants that only grows in some seasons.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's yeah. You can freeze it. Yeah, I also freeze it, and it works fine. Yeah, for me it works fine. I freeze. I have I have some frozen hyacinth because hyacinth it grows up in April, I think April, May, and then in the summer it's just yeah. But that's why it's interesting to have a big list of plants. That's why I also like spearmint, because spearmint lasts for a long time, and of course coffee. You can find coffee all here, but you can't grow it in Europe or most of cold countries, of course. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've just got 2 more questions before we have a break. One from Catherine asking, do you develop a whole roll at a time for each experiment? And do you use a spiral tank to develop?
Well, I use normally when I'm making tests, I just use a small, I cut it like this. When I do tests, I cut small parts of it like this. That's why I use a lot of 35. So it's, and then when I'm testing, when I'm processing, when I know how it works, I normally use big tanks, the big ones, the 100 feet, or 30-meter spiral tanks, the Lomo tanks for 16 millimeters. And whenever I know the process works, I'm safe to use the whole the whole tank. Yeah, but I do tests when I'm not sure, of course, with small strips. Yeah.
And please could you, from Lisa, please could you explain the role of the peroxide in your reversal recipe?
Yeah, peroxide is a very interesting, hydrogen peroxide is a very interesting bleach, the way, because it's a powerful oxidizer. So it's a powerful bleach, but it works in a much different way than the conventional processes that are more chemical. What happens with hydrogen? It's the oxygen that it's liberated from the hydrogen peroxide that oxidizes the silver. But it's been it has. I've been trying to work on other ways of doing it. I built hydrogen generator with I built the ozone generator. I tried I tried to find other ways to build my own bleach without having to buy hydrogen peroxide, and also for being able to control it better, because hydrogen peroxide it sometimes is difficult. It depends on the manufacturer, depends on the factory. Some use different stabilizers because all hydrogen peroxide comes stabilized from the factory. But for industrial purposes, so for photography, that's why you need to find, I always say, you need to fine tune your own hydrogen peroxide bleach, because they differ a lot. If I buy it, even in Portugal, it depends in which factory I buy it from. So I have to make tests before, so I have to find the right way. But the thing is a very interesting way. The way it works is it's much more different than the conventional potassium permanganate or for the ones Andy tried so many times. Is a master of of hydrogen peroxide bleach. Andy was here. I don't know if he's still here, and others. I think others have been. But Andy, I follow Andy progress, and he's been doing a lot of interesting, really interesting work on it. But personally, I've been trying to find other solutions because of so I could make it easier. To make it easier to have access, because I can't go somewhere with hydrogen peroxide in my bag. I can't get into a plane because they will get me arrested, of course, or they won't let me go inside with hydrogen peroxide. So I've been trying to find ways to, if I go to somewhere where I can't find hydrogen peroxide, I can build my own bleach, but it's not easy. It's really not easy. Like I said, I've been trying with hydrogen generators. I've been trying with ozone generators, so I use the O3, and but it's complicated. And I might show you one day my machines, but because but still I didn't have interesting results. What I've been trying to do, that just because Trigon was talking about that, was I've been trying to find a biodegradable color developer, something that, but that's really also a tricky thing, because I've been looking for in mushrooms, because mushrooms are such an alien thing that some of them have the most similar molecules than color developing agents, but I still couldn't find the right one. But I've been trying, because the color process it's much different from black and white. Is easier. You can use many plants. They just have to act on the silver. In color, they have to act on the color layers and the different color layers. So it's much more trickier. But I've also been trying to work on that. But still, I don't have results I can share with you that could be helpful. Yes. Yeah.
That's really exciting to hear, though, that there's something which does have a similar molecular structure, and there are so many mushrooms and fungal organisms out there that you'd hope that we'll be able to find one which is a good fit. I'm really excited to kind of keep up to date with how your research goes with that.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll have a short break for now. Kim Knowles lectures in alternative and experimental film at Aberystwyth University in Wales, and curates the Black Box experimental strand at the Edinburgh International Film Festival. Her recent monograph, Experimental Film and Photochemical Practices, assesses the contemporary relevance of film in the digital era and draws on theories of new materialism, eco-criticism, and post-humanism. She has published widely on contemporary and historical forms of avant-garde filmmaking, as well as crossovers with others such as photography, other arts such as photography, architecture, poetry, and dance. She is also co-editor of the forthcoming collection of Cinematic Intermediality, Theory and Practice. Following this, we'll hear from Joanna Mays. Joanna is a film artist who explores the experience of being in a location at a particular time through the medium of film. Bringing her experience of musical improvisation to her practice, Joanna opens her work up to chance through hand processing and the use of organic materials to create short film poems that reverberate between abstraction and control. She represents place through a layering of approaches to materiality. Analog film responds to the light in that place and time, physical outcomes often charged with atmosphere from the site through the use of materials of the locality, such as seawater for processing and lichens and berries for tinting on the film. So I'll hand over to Kim first.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. It's really nice to be in such good company. I feel like a little bit of an anomaly in this symposium because I'm not a filmmaker. I think it's probably necessary to say that from the start. I'm excited about film practice from the perspective of theory and aesthetics. So I like to kind of facilitate and observe and talk about and write about primarily. And I guess I've come to understand a lot of processes in photochemical film through conversations with people that have been really generous in explaining things to me and giving me the details that I need in order to write about those things. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, so yeah, I'm a lecturer at Aberystwyth University, which for those of you that don't know is on the west coast of Wales. So I teach film theory and a little bit of practice, even though I'm not really a practitioner. But we've been, over the past 5 years, setting up a darkroom on a lab space at Aberystwyth. So we have Super 8, 16, Super 16 cameras, hand processing facilities, an optical printer, a Steenbeck editing table, the bits and pieces that I hope will at some point come together to form a contact printer and a digital scanner, and we're investing in a much nicer scanner over the next few months, hopefully. So this is it's a resource that's really growing, and we're lucky enough to have Marcy Sode, who's joined us, and she's helping us along with James Holcomb to really build up that resource. Yeah, it's nice to be on the same panel as Phil Hoffman. So Phil came to Aberystwyth with his team in May of last year and hosted an Aberystwyth, Wales version of Film Fun. So this was, yeah, really a really beautiful experience. Just happened to be like one of the nicest weekends. It looks like the Mediterranean here. It rarely actually looks like that, but it helped me to actually see Aberystwyth with fresh eyes, to have these guys coming to work with our students and teach them 16mm practices and eco-processing. And we even tried to fix with seawater. I think we tried to actually use the seaweed as a developer. and it didn't work. But I think Phil got some images from the using the seawater as fix. But yeah, I'm not really going to talk about that. I think I just wanted to provide the context for how I arrive at this kind of subject and where I'm located within it. So these kinds of workshops and visits from artists over the years have really helped me to conceptualize and theorize photochemical practice, and it's really been bound up with considerations of environmental consciousness, but it sort of goes beyond that, thinking about chemistry and alternatives to toxic forms of image making, and it extends outwards to thinking about how photochemical film provides us with a way of communicating the natural world in different ways. So, you know, opening up forms of representation that are suppressed or ignored in more mainstream forms of image making. So my excitement about photochemical film comes really from a broader excitement about materiality in the contemporary world, and how film can be used as a sort of communicating vessel, so providing us with a way to articulate material interconnections. So my overriding belief then is that tactile forms of communication in film connect with broader theoretical ideas that emerge from new materialism, posthumanism, eco-criticism and environmental politics. And this has been for me a way to overturn these oculocentrist and humanist ways of approaching the world. So thinking about environmental consciousness in terms of the way that we perceive, the way that photochemical film practices in all their kind of diversity can open up new ways of visioning that go beyond more mainstream forms of representation. So those ideas are quite central to my recent book, which comes out of, emerges out of a series of discussions with artists and following several artists quite closely over the years and getting an insight into their working practices. And these conversations, as I said, have helped me to understand approaches to hand processing, optical printing, contact printing, eco-processing, and a whole host of other material interventions that I discuss throughout the book. But probably what gave me the most valuable insight and what shifted the book in a different direction was taking part in Phil Hoffman's Film Farm in 2019. And that was initially supposed to be a form of observation, but it was Phil's suggestion that I fully engage with that retreat as an artistic process that was the most important turning point for the development of the book. And helped me to actually explore different forms of writing. So that immersion in filmic processes and being in that space and having that kind of insight perhaps gave me a passion for actually getting my hands dirty and being involved in these kinds of processes. But I mean, I'm a writer, so I'll always default back to that form of expression, but that artistic immersion helped me to see my writing from a completely different perspective and write actually from a more immersive and embodied perspective. So yeah, for those of you that have either read the book or been at some of the launch events that I've done recently, that some of what I say today will be quite familiar. So I'm I'm going to dip into aspects of the book and hopefully talk about environmentally conscious filmmaking from a perspective that will complement the other papers. So it was the landscape. So I went on this retreat it felt like an environmentally conscious form of filmmaking, but I'd gone on this long haul flight from the UK to Canada, which didn't feel particularly environmentally friendly, but it was sort of being in that landscape and responding to it through immersive reflection that I found the most revealing and transformative. And as my nickname on the board reveals, I got really into filming quite close up, invading the privacy of spiders and bugs and caterpillars and all kinds of critters that got their own back eventually towards the end of the retreat. So that reduction, in a way, that sort of filming with macro tubes was for me a sort of expansion. And I didn't write the book in a chronological order. So I actually wrote the chapter before the film farm section, after I'd been on film farm, and that's where I'm really talking about some of the environmental approaches or making connections between those films and ecological perspectives. So in a way, my experience at Film Farm really affected the way that I spoke about other films that are in the book. So what the retreat revealed to me then was a kind of embodied perspective, new perspective on the theories that I'd been employing previously up to that point. An environmental consciousness as an aesthetic and theoretical approach became a lot more solidified. So rather than talking about ecochemistry or environmentally friendly alternatives to toxic chemistry, I'm going to draw on some sections of the book. So my theoretical approach to photochemical film centers on what I've called in the book an aesthetic of contact, and that weaves its way throughout the chapters. This is actually an image from my friend Vicky Smith, I think she's here, the making of noisy licking, dribbling and spitting. So this aesthetic of contact, I say in the book, responds to the call for a wholesale revisioning of the world with material gestures that appeal to the body. It privileges the unseen through an emphasis on sensation, so that which can't be comprehended through vision alone, but points to the politics of the encounter, the hand of the artist, the layers of time and the communicative spaces between physical phenomenon. And this hinges in many ways on the power of surfaces, so the surface of the film strip and the surface of the filmmaker's body, as a potential alternative source of knowledge about the world, where traditional representational approaches fail to fully translate the essence of things. So for me, the film surface is a site of reimagining, privileging the haptic over the purely ocular, and it resists what Anat Pick describes as ocular inflation, this tendency in mainstream media to present the natural world as a visual spectacle, employing technical means of hypervisibility so that we see everything closer and more clearly, and in a kind of spectacularization. So inherent in these alternative inherent in these representations of clarity is the assumption that seeing more clearly is understanding, and that making the world more visible through greater clarity, precision and proximity, we can conquer and contain the otherwise unknown. And in the book I talk about popular TV documentaries like Blue Planet, Planet Earth, Frozen Planet, where we see these like scenes of natural beauty and primal brutality that amaze and entertain, but from my perspective, they do little to create actual physical bonds. And Pick cites Paul Virilio's zero degree of representation to describe how the kind of optical overexposure in these documentaries actually moves us further away from this goal of representation by suppressing the unseen. So there's an emphasis always on hypervisuality, on hyper clarity, rather than exploring the things that we don't see. So the aesthetic of contact, I'm arguing, is rooted, on the other hand, in images that replace visual clarity with flux, uncertainty, and an in-betweenness that appeals to the body, what Laura Marks calls the haptic image. So in the book, I talk about films like Tomonari Nishikawa's Sound of a Million Insects, Light of a Thousand Stars, as an example of ecological filmmaking. So in this film, Nishikawa buried a 100-foot roll of 35mm negative stock under leaves 25 kilometers outside the Fukushima Daiichi power station in Japan, where in 2011 an earthquake triggered a 15-meter tsunami that led to one of the biggest nuclear disasters. So in talking about the film, I draw on Timothy Morton's concept of the hyperobject to demonstrate a form of representation that addresses this problem of visuality. Morton says that hyperobjects are real objects that are massively distributed in time and space. Good examples, he says, would be global warming and nuclear radiation. Hyperobjects are so vast, so long-lasting, that they defy human time and spatial scales. They wouldn't fit on a landscape painting. And so here I think that Nishikawa's film can be read as an attempt to visualize environmental phenomena through a form of material contact. So what we see is less important than how we see, since the meaning resides in a form of resistance to either the power or the possibility of legibility. Another example that I draw on is Emmanuel Lefran's Parties visibles et invisibles d'un ensemble sous tension, visible and invisible particles of a togetherness, an ensemble under pressure. And I think this film, for me, has received a lot less attention than it deserves in terms of environmentally conscious forms of filmmaking. So in this film, Lefran shot an image that he could see from his window using Super 8 film and time-lapse photography, condensing a 12-hour period from dawn to dusk in just 7 minutes. And alongside this, he buried strips of processed but unexposed Super 8 and 16mm color film in the ground in various locations that we see within the frame, and then unearthed them at various time intervals. So the film stocks with different kinds of emulsion composition meant that the earth reacted differently with the layers of the chemicals, giving rise to a really wide spectrum of color, texture, and density. And those two positive and negative versions of the time-lapse footage are brought together with the buried sequences through a process of bypacking. So I'm sure I don't need to explain that to most of you, but bypacking is an optical printing procedure where you layer sandwiches of film together and rephotograph them. So that in that sense, you get a kind of superimposition or a blending of the two images. And the end result is a kind of energetic animation of the figurative image by this degradation and decomposition of the buried strips, so the two like merge together. Lefranc refers to this as a bipolar world where the invisible takes shape within the visible, where the first dissolves into the second and vice versa. And that bringing together is, or the transposing of the invisible qualities onto the visible qualities, the underground and the overground, is emphasized by this constant impression of flipping that we get in the film, that seems to kind of caress the eye in a like tactile gesture. What's interesting about Lefranc's film is the way that it finds inspiration in Maurice Merleau-Ponty's text, The Visible and the Invisible. Vision for Merleau-Ponty is inseparable from touch. The look, he says, envelopes, palpitates, espouses the visible things, as though they were in a relationship with pre-established harmony with them, as though we knew them before knowing them. So this relationship with phenomenology, with its emphasis on the body as a site of knowledge, translates, I think, to the body of the film, which is capable, as we see in both of those films, of communicating ecological realities that are impossible to visualize through traditional means, through other forms of visualizing. So I ask the question then, is this an environmentally conscious form of filmmaking? In its quest for new languages to represent the natural world, and in its acknowledgement that environmental issues resist dominant forms of representation, I'd suggest that it is. Because it allows us to see and experience the earth differently. We get a different visual experience, but also a tactile impression. And some might say, and have said in terms of this kind of filmmaking, that the process gives agency to the natural world. That the natural world is a co-creator or a collaborator in the artistic process. I've sort of suggested that in some of my writings, but it's not a route necessarily that I go down. It's not a point that I labour in terms of, you know, the earth having some kind of agency over the process, but it's obviously there in terms of the way that the earth co-creates the image. So I'm going to talk briefly about some of the films that feature in chapter 4 of the book, which centres on DIY film communities and features this discussion or autoethnographic account of film farm. And this is partly because some of these films are screening in an online programme this week by the Canadian Filmmakers Distribution Centre. So that's been on for about a week, and it's continuing until Tuesday the 2nd. So on the evening of the 2nd, at 7:30 UK time, there's a panel discussion with Phil Hoffman, Eva Colche, Penny Mccann, and Francie Duran, who all have films in that small screening. So I talk first of all about Markings 1 to 3 by Eva Colche, which draws on handmade techniques to express a tactile sensibility and translate a physical connection to the surrounding environment. At the beginning of the film, we see feet. We assume that these are the filmmaker's feet shifting carefully over terrain that we can barely make out. And these are superimposed onto images of different natural surfaces around the barn: grass, daisies, stones, water, foliage, flowers, and the branches and trunk of a tree. And these slow and delicate movements suggest a journey that's not predetermined, but exploratory and curious, feeling out a direction, sensing a way, a body receptive to the energies of the land and listening intently. And this really makes me think of my own experience in that landscape, you know, my working my way around it, feeling my way around it, getting to know it over the course of several days, wandering around, trying to find a visual approach that emerged from the embodied engagement with that landscape. And then the second section, we see this open field and a sparse scattering of trees, and then a finger enters the frame and traces a line along the horizon, hand scratching into the emotion. I think this is a really nice play of proximity and distance. So the gestures combine scratching, sometimes with sometimes placing small dots of tint on the image, and sometimes across the whole frame. So there's this uncanny fusion of this, what seems like a giant hand, and the landscape, and the spark of contact. I read this, I read this in the book as a representation of the kind of psychic bonds that we form with a place, this sort of spark of energy that I really relate to in terms of the way that I experienced physically, intellectually and emotionally that film farm retreat. So physical connection in the film becomes more explicit as hands reach out, rest on a bale of hay, a wooden gate, a stone wall, a metal fence, with each object emitting a kind of energy or life force through a combination of scratching, tinting, and a crackle of static on the soundtrack. As a finger towards the end delicately removes the drops of water from a pair of plastic gloves pegged out on the line, it seems clear that Colche is referencing the inseparability of process from the physical experience of the landscape. So Penny McCann's Crashing Sky is another film that I talk about in the book, and it's another example of how these artisanal techniques of material intervention can bring about a visual language of things. So we have techniques of solarization and copper toning that activate the surface of the celluloid. And for me, it kind of invites us into this vibrant and constantly shifting relationship with the landscape. The ground seems to light up, the trees pulsate, and the split-toned bodies of these grazing horses stimulate a renewed perceptive attentiveness. It draws the attention, the eye of the viewer into the colours and textures as a really strong departure from more realistic representations of landscape. And I sort of read this as kind of learning to see again. So revisioning, I use this term quite a lot in the book, seeing differently, but reviewing something, revisioning something as though with fresh eyes through that intervention on the surface of the film strip. And I think this really expresses the kind of magic of tinting and toning in the way that those techniques give like another worldly feel to the most like mundane scenes and images. So you have a barn in the distance, and we see these grasses gently swaying in the wind. And in a way, there's nothing particularly remarkable about this image, but its stillness and the way that the colours stretch across the surface is kind of mesmerising. And it creates a temporality that I think is slightly out of kilter with the real world. So again, you know, asking us to see things differently, because the viewer is lured into this dreamy in-between space, or a state of reverie, and that's really emphasized by this brown shades of the copper toning. It's familiar yet unfamiliar. And I think what's really interesting in this film is that it draws on the chance nature of tinting and tonings. It's not an exact science, and you know, one can never be entirely sure of how the images will respond to the dyes. And that translates into a viewing experience that's defined by anticipation and surprise, with each frame of the film telling a different story of physical contact with the chemicals. So the eyes shifting continuously from the photographic image to the traces of hand processing and colouring on the surface of the film. And it resists this stable reference point, this idea that the world is something that we can render visible and own and fix. It's constantly in flux, it's constantly shifting. So the last film that I wanted to talk about, it's the final film from image from Crashing Skies, is Francisco Duran's It Matters What. That was produced at Film Farm using Carol Doing's phytogram technique. So this is a process where plants and flowers act as both the image and the developer by using the internal chemistry in the same way as the eco-processing techniques that we've been talking about. And the images appear as formless or amorphous, this result of the then liquid solution seeping outwards as it makes contact with the film. And I think what's really nice about this technique is that no darkroom is required. It's just bright sunlight and the passing of time and the chemistry itself. And I've read this in the book as this phytogram sequence as an expression of non-human interiority, or an articulation of material presence that refuses representational distance in favour of sensory immersion. It's a kind of a struggle between abstraction and figuration, because the phytogram imagery constantly pulls the eye in multiple directions, and I describe it as a haptic rediscovery of the natural world. And what's particularly striking about this technique, and what distinguishes it from the rayogram process, is this impression, this sense that we're seeing into the soul of the plant, creating again a sense of familiarity and strangeness at the same time. And this sequence in Duran's film follows a passage of Donna Haraway's text on the Anthropocene that gives the images an added political weight. So Haraway says, what is it to surrender the capacity to think? These times called the Anthropocene are times of multi-species, including human urgency, of great mass death and extinction, of unrushing disasters whose unpredictable specificities are foolishly taken as unknowability itself, of refusing to know and cultivate the capacity of response ability, of refusing to be present in and to onrushing catastrophe in time, of unprecedented looking away. I can never read that section of the text without feeling quite emotional. I think it's one of the most beautiful articulations of environmental catastrophe, or the need to be present and conscious. And it hits me every time I read it. So that phytogram sequence, I think, is a way of countering what Haraway describes as the act of looking away, and it brings us into this really intimate confrontation with the natural world, with plant matter. And so in this sense, I think Duran makes a really potent connection between environmental politics and what might be considered environmental filmmaking. So I realized during the writing of the book that photochemical film aesthetics are really intricately tied to an aesthetics of nature and a non-human. And for me, this goes beyond ecochemistry, but is about activating surfaces in a variety of ways that bring about new forms of sensitivity to sensitivity of or to and a kind of consciousness towards the outside world. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kim. It was really nice to kind of have some more theoretical background alongside our very scientific start to the event. So next we're going to hear from Joanna.
Hi. Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for hosting this and for getting everyone together. It's been absolutely amazing hearing everyone so far. Okay, so yeah, I'm an artist filmmaker, and I come at hand processing and alternative processes from that perspective. So I thought I'd just start with this. So for me, film is a place of intersections where the story of the present collapses into a moment of action, light, and presence. For me, filmmaking is essentially performative and experiential. We may be in one place, watching and waiting, but time is always moving, tracked by the ticking of the clockwork motor on my clockwork wind-up Bolex camera. I observe the comings and goings of the world through my tiny lens, always looking for ways to embody sight as material reality, processing with seaweed, tinting with lichen, and returning life to the film image. I celebrate process, welcoming small remnants from the experience of filmmaking in place to remain as artifacts, such as sand, hairs, and dust, past in the present contained in film. Marks of my personal presence are also retained in the film, taking an artisanal, hands-on approach to film creation and development, contrary to the hands-off nature and speed of digital image capture. Projection, whether analog or live digital visuals, is often also made by myself, keeping a sense of my personal presence within the artwork. So, as you probably already gathered, place is important to me, and this is my place, St Ives and Penwith in Cornwall. The thing about this area is that it's really rich and multi-layered. Heritage is absolutely a part of everyday life here, really. It's the minute you walk out onto the moors, you can't miss the presence of the past, and that's become very important to me. So I like to spend time in places, whether walking, swimming, foraging, and film helps me understand place through spending time at site. This led to wondering about ways of bringing the site into the film artifact itself. I did a PhD at Dartington College of Art some years ago, and I was fortunate enough to attend Schumacher College's Holistic Science Masters Lectures. And they suggested that we think about materials differently. And they asked, what can we learn from materials by spending time with them? And I've taken this forward into my practice. It feels very important to me, while I'm spending time in a place, to actually allow the materials to speak is probably too poetic, is it? But to be listened to anyway. So I moved into working with analogue film as I became interested in it as a document of time spent in a place. A piece of film is a physical document of light at a time in a place and the photochemical relationships at that moment. Myself in that place and the camera as an extension of that. Camera and its personality as mediator and participant. And by using other materials within processing from the site being filmed, attempting to re-index a part of the relationship of the artwork to that place and time, whilst understanding that this can never be achieved. It's just something that I enjoy doing, I guess. It's, so it's part of my practice. I enjoy that attempt, even though I know that we can't really do it. So I didn't set out to be a kitchen processing specialist, but it's a reflection of my life and that of my family. I had my daughter, who's now 12, all that time ago, and I was concerned for the porosity of her new baby skin and of her breathing. The first 6 months, babies are incredibly porous. And I didn't want to damage that fragile and vulnerable relationship of the baby with their environment through introducing toxic chemicals into the house. And once I had this awareness through research, it's hard to go back. So I like to pay attention to site, pay attention to the materials at the site, their life cycle, and also the history of human use. I then return home to research ideas and look for clues. I talk to people, some of the people here, some of the speakers I've spoken to in the past. It's a wonderful community, the alternative filmmaking community, with a lot of generosity of spirit. And I listen and learn about what others are doing in both film and textile processing and dyeing, which I'll mention a bit later. And I'm always hunting for ways in which to develop the relationship of my film to the site in which I'm working. So I like to gather materials at the site I'm at. Here we have the yellow at the top there, that's in the streets of St Ives. And I've actually found that because of lockdown, there are just so many less people here and I can actually see what's on the streets. So on the bottom right is a very important lichen that has been used over history as an important dye, which you can get purple dye from. If anyone's interested, just have a look at the history of dye, and you'll understand how lichens tied in with that. But my concern was that lichen is very slow growing, and or it can be. And I really didn't want to just denude my very local area in lockdown of its beautiful lichen. So I was wondering about what I was going to do about this. And after one swimming trip, on the way back, I noticed that there was all this lichen hanging around after it's just been raining, and it actually gets swept down from the roofs, down the drains and onto the street. So I'm going around looking a bit mad with my bag. After I've been swimming each day, I go and collect a bit more of this lichen, which I'm drying out ready for. It takes about 6 weeks. You have to soak it in ammonia or urine in order to get the colour out. Which brings me on to film tinting. The story of film tinting has been to use toxic chemistry right from the start. There are very practical reasons for this. They work well and were byproducts of the prevalent Victorian coal industry. Interestingly, aniline dyes were invented in Cornwall by William Murdoch. Again, something else I found out from a heritage project I was involved with in Redruth. And whilst researching Murdoch, I found that he actually took out the patent for aniline dyes. Even though the aniline dyes, being a byproduct of coal, they don't actually mine coal in Cornwall. But because of the the beam engines for mining, there was a lot of coal in Cornwall. So that's how I was able to do the experiments here. So obviously heavy metals, not ideal for home use. So this is an area which we need to reimagine. The way in which I started to think about this, having been introduced to tinting and toning by James Holcomb, again, some years ago now, I started to think about other types of dyes, and I looked to the material and textile dyeing for information. And it's interesting how the other speakers were talking about doing the same thing with photographic processes. And you know, photographic processes and filmmaking are relatively recent. People have been working with materials to do all kinds of things for so many years before that, that there's an awful lot of information kind of waiting to re-emerge. And I love this. I love the story of dyeing, also being mainly female as well, likely to be in cottage industry, and that women would go and collect the crottle, as it was known in Scotland, and you could get this very valuable purple dye from it. I've been researching the story of lichen collecting for dyeing in Cornwall. I haven't come across any detail about it yet, but it's pretty obvious they would have done it, because you get the same type of, well, because of granite, you get the similar kinds of similar types of lichen, and they would have needed dye, and it was worth a lot of money, so I'm sure they'd have been doing it. So I started with traditional strong organic dyes, such as madder and coreopsis, I think I spelled that right, grown by smallholders, and I had them sent to me. And then I had to start thinking about mordants. I noticed people talking about mordants on the chat. It's very hard to know because people haven't dyed things much, film much, to know exactly how these things work. And as was mentioned, I think Ricardo was saying that, you know, you don't know really until you try it, and different stocks, different plants, different everything. So it's all about testing, which I have to say doesn't come particularly naturally to me. Adrian Cousins always laughing at me for not having made enough notes and written things down, and so I'm learning. I have my little notebook, and I am always trying to get better at that, because it's the way not to waste time and materials. So what I have found is that dye needs to be strong to work on film. My general rule of thumb is that if a dye stuff doesn't stain your fingers, then it's not strong enough. Fruits and roots are good in that way. Although I have found since that lichen may be an exception to this. Somebody was asking about lichen, and I'll talk about lichen as developer shortly, but they are particularly strong dyes. They will attach to plastics and these kind of things, although they do need careful preparation. And okay, I'm going to, oh, I actually can't see it now here, can you? Unless you can see picture in picture. I'll show this later, but I've got a twig here with different types of lichen on, and it's a real problem for the non-lichenologists. Lichen look so similar unless you really know what you're doing, and so I end up collecting the wrong things, and so I've had to have a bit of a crash course in lichen as to be able to find the ones that I want, or even to identify what I've got, and therefore to be able to take notes and know what I'm doing. So fixing the colour, salt and vinegar can help with that as well. But again, does it need to be fixed? I don't really know yet. But you know, might as well just bung it in because it says sea salt. So I've got sea salt up the road. So you know, and vinegar, stick it in some vinegar just to see. And I love this. The dyer's manual was suggested to me as a bit of a Bible for for wool dyeing. So I managed to get hold of a copy of that. So tinting with organic dyes, I thought people might be interested in my very simple recipe. You boil the dye stuff and then you simmer it, and you can strain it or not. There is a method of wool dyeing called contact dyeing, where you actually do put the materials in with the dye stuff. So I find sometimes contact can help make it stronger, sometimes not needed. I let the plant liquor cool to 40 degrees because otherwise you can reticulate the film, basically kill it off by boiling it, which I did the other day. I don't know, this is a thing I find, I'm not a chemist, I'm not I like a bit of science, but I'm not a scientist. I'm an artist and I'm working at home and I get distracted. I'm doing something else and I kind of having a chat, or my daughter comes in and I forget what I'm doing. And, I let the thing boil and the, and the film spoils a bit. But hey ho, that's, happy accidents are a huge part of my work. I'm all right with that stuff most of the time. It's like Ricardo said, sometimes I do mind. So that's how I've learned to test so that I can make a choice. And as Adrian tends to say is, the more you know, the more you can allow things open, but know what you're doing. So you agitate. I found that with my tests that letting the film cool and then leaving it and often overnight can really help. So that's my tip. So blackberry tinting, I found blackberry works really well. That was a lovely easy one. And I just show a little bit of telecynid film just so we actually see some film, because I'm aware talking stills when you're a filmmaker is a bit strange. So this is Carnuni. This is actually 8mm film, which is quite interesting to be working with when you're tinting. And, it's very small, so I think you probably get a more intense colour that way, but it's hard to see what you're doing. So recently I've been working with all 16mm black and white. But it does give, this is still a negative, so there's that other question as well, how you're going to project it. I do reversal. I had a go with Ricardo's recipe all that time ago. Thank you, Ricardo. And Adrian's been helping me find, the right chemistry in the UK to actually get that alternative bleach working. But it's just another thing that can, that adds in another layer of potential accidents. So I try to tie things down a bit so that I kind of know what's going on. So Aldebrae, love the colour you get from Aldebrae. Looks great, but not very strong when it's projected. I was just trying some projection last night and couldn't see it terribly well. But then often I telecine, so that's okay. Oh, no, I'm going not too fast. So lichen tinting. I found a pine cone on an artist walk that I was leading with Mays Creative, which is my other hat. And to Carnuni Ancient Settlement, and just did a tiny test with a little bit of it and found this amazing colour. But it's weird, finding a colour doesn't mean that it's going to actually dye the film. I've had lovely colours from things like bracken and it doesn't do a thing on the film. So obviously there are technical reasons for it, and that's what I tend to do. I come at it from an experiential point of view, and then I go and do the research to find out why things work the way they do, maybe to help me advance. So on the right is lichen from Porthgwydden, which is where I often swim. And that gave this kind of slightly grey colour, which I don't know, might use again, but it needed. The other thing that people talk about, environmental awareness, is how much, if you don't get a very strong tint, then you'd need more of the material, and I try to use as little as possible and be extremely careful about how I take things. So the amount, taking an amount for testing is one thing, but taking enough to be able to do any serious amount of tinting is another. And so I kind of went on a bit of a quiet one with the tinting for a bit because of that, and lockdown and not being able to get to places with enough available lichen. And but what I'll explain in a minute what I did instead. But I did manage to get some lichen that didn't work at all for tinting, and I just had it sitting there and I didn't want to throw it away. So, and that's the same with seaweed processing. So I've been doing quite a bit of seaweed processing with some really great results. Again, testing is the way to find out what works. It's not really about being given the right recipe, it's about testing what your local materials do. So I don't know quite how I ended up doing this. I think I saw this stuff that's left over, and I put the seaweed on my garden, which isn't very, it's really rather small. And I didn't know what to do next with this seaweed I had left over. And I felt a bit funny taking it back down to the beach and thinking that people might wonder what on earth I was doing. And anyway, it would have been boiled. And anyway, I thought, try and find something to do. And I just had this idea of making seaweed. Could I make paper from it? And again, lockdown project. It was just fun making seaweed. So that's what I've been doing, and trying to use things from the area I'm filming in again. So because of lockdown or just before that, I've been doing quite a lot of surf filming. So I've been processing it in seaweed, and then tree mallow grows along by the beach. So I've been using tree mallow for paper making so that I could make use of the seaweed. There we are. That's the tree mallow being boiled, and that's some of the paper. So what then happened with some of these, there were waste materials from my processes, if you like, which again are things that have been, all of the seaweed has been thrown up on the beach. The tree mallow drops at this time of year. I don't know what happens at other times of the year because I haven't tried it, but there is, there's this abundance of this material. And so I just had this idea. I think I was looking into, Adrian and I have been talking about phenols or something for some reason, I don't know anyway. And I was just looking up what had phenols, and I saw that lichen had a load of phenols. So there we are. In the last week, I think, I just thought, give it a go. It's like Des been saying, it's kind of easy to try it. So both of those are developed in lichen, which just amazes me. I find it amazing. But the thing is, it's not that I'm looking for new developers. I am looking to use the materials I find on site, or the materials that I'm using for other things. So that's my approach. And I thought, well, got some tree mallow, why not give that a go as well? And I think when I looked at the list of phenols, I can't even remember now how I found it. The tree mallow I found as a paper making material because this lovely book that is in my list at the end talks about looking at the genus of plants, seeing where they come from. And tree mallow is actually the same family as mulberry, which is historically been used for Japanese paper making. So I thought, well, give that a go. And I thought, well, just try it for developing, and there it is. So again, needs more testing. When I say it's unreliable, that doesn't matter really, does it? But you just need to test every time. So I'm just using a basic caffeinol recipe, or Adrian's high contrast, which seemed to work rather well as well. But I'm now going to use what Ricardo was talking about, just see it in terms of pH and give that a go. So, I love the way we all work together on this stuff. And and my plans. So I want to develop paper making I've been looking into the history of papers for printing for photographic processes. And so I was thinking, well, how can I bring this seaweed back into my filmmaking process? You know, this paper I'm making, how can I bring it back in? And so I thought I could use it for cyanotype printing, could actually use the paper itself for anthrotypes, maybe actually as a thing itself. And then Kayla Parker, she'd said, oh, why not use it as projection material? So last night there I was having a go with that, and I'm absolutely delighted with the results. So that's what I'm planning to do. So these are some basic references I think might be useful for people. The Cornwall Archaeological Society is these lovely online lectures at the moment, and there's a map, a wonderful interactive map at cornwall.gov.uk, and Field Studies Council talks about wonderful field guides to lichen. So I'm going to stop my screen share there for a minute. So this is, there we are. So if you're going lichen collecting, this one twig has on it 3 different sorts of lichen. That's the lichen. I think it's Usnea, can't remember now, which is what I actually use for the development, which grows very readily on Cornwall stone walls. This one, the crispy one, I found that's got a lovely orange. That's a really good one. But this one, which grows right next to them down here, doesn't do anything at all. And that's the one I use. And that's the next one I'm going to be trying for developing. So, but can I just make a note, because I know people might be keen to give this a go. Be extremely careful when collecting lichen. Lichen can be very slow growing, and the colonies are part of the landscape. They've been there for hundreds of years, potentially. You know, only if you can just take things that have fallen, so like a fallen twig, or collected off the ground, you know, after storms is a good time. You know, there are certain types, you know, but you need to talk to a local lichenologist so that you know what you're doing if you're going to be actually collecting it, so they can help you find which ones are not at risk. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, I think that was a really important point you made at the end there, to kind of remind us all not to just go out and excitedly kind of pick everything that we see in our vicinity, because otherwise, you know, you're removing it from an essential, you know, role that it's playing in our environment. I also really enjoyed your kind of link back to having kind of waste materials in a way, and then finding that actually you could use them as a developer when, you know, you weren't intending them to be a developer, and then they turn into paper. And it's a really nice just kind of, yeah, circle to your practice, and it's a great example of how kind of as artists we don't have to define ourselves by, you know, one singular methodology or process, but actually when we're presented with kind of opportunities or things, there's no reason why we can't kind of expand beyond what we're doing and start to think about our materials in different ways. So there are a couple of questions while we're on the topic of lichens, which I'll just ask from the audience. So a nice comment from Kathy is that lichens are a bioindicator for air quality. Not a question, but a great point.
I mean, the other thing about the lichen as well is that sometimes the ones you get that are very plentiful are actually resistant to certain pollutants. So you're quite likely to find certain lichen which are acid tolerant around farmland, for example. And actually the one that I did do that developing in is one of those. So they grow quite freely around.
Great. Vicky was asking, what did you say that you were planning on projecting? Was it your handmade paper?
Projecting onto it, yes. That last slide was actually of the projection. It's 16mm film projected onto the paper. So it does. So I almost just tried to do it now. We did discuss it, but you know, you get the light coming through the paper as well. So the gaps. I mean, my seaweed paper is not good paper. It's more like a little bit of sculpture, and it does move around as well. So I had this sitting around, and it moves. So sometimes it's this shape, and sometimes it's this shape because it's still taking on water. So you know, so it's a live thing, which is kind of fun. I was wondering, you know, I wonder whether that has, you know, any way of bringing that into the film itself, but I don't think so.
And then Laura's just wondering what sort of seaweed has worked best for you? For developing film, sorry.
Yeah, the seaweed that's there. So we have loads of gutweed, but it's just such fun. I love all this, you know. I have, you know, through getting into, a friend of mine is into foraging and cooking, so when lockdown's down, we're going to go down the beach, you know, he's going to be cooking some seaweed stuff up, and every time I'm collecting something and going, ooh, this is good for developing or tinting, and he goes, ooh, yum, or you know. So I did think that kelp, which comes from, so we have St Ives Bay, that picture I showed you, you know, so further out you get the kelp, which is the big fat stuff, which is better for eating. But I thought that was like the magic ingredient, and I didn't quite understand why I was getting such a good result. But the gutweed, there's so much of it, so I bit the bullet and just tried just gutweed, and it worked just as well. And interestingly, I was using this high contrast Cafenol. I don't know why, again, I just kind of thought something a bit punchy might help, because I got very soft results. And it may well be because of what Ricardo was saying about pH and using more, you know, using more carbonate, you know, it may well be that that's why it was so much, it's worked so much better, because it happens to have more carbonate in it. Yeah. But I mean, you've got so much, like the whole thing of potash, and you know, you used to actually, I mean, seaweed is an alkaline, so I did look into, you know, boil it, but actually you need so much of it that actually that's not ecologically good. I mean, you know, it's like using loads and loads of salt. I think that, you know, it's really fun to do these things, and if it makes sense to your practice, then that's just brilliant. But you know, this kind of environment isn't simple. So
yeah, it's definitely not simple. Okay, we'll save the other few questions we've had for at the end of all the speakers. We're going to have another short break now. Hello, welcome back again, everyone. So now we're on to our final two speakers. These two have worked together regularly in the past, so I thought it was nice to put them together. So they have a lot of kind of shared interests in plant-based developer soups and workshops. So first we're going to hear from Dougie Brunner, who is an artist from Berlin. And she's been involved with the Sustainable Darkroom as well for the past 8 months. Daggie's worked with Super 8 film for almost half of her life, short films, experimental films, and has done a lot of research into plant-based developers. For about a decade now, Daggie's developed her films using eco-friendly materials. She also runs a brilliant website filled with all of her developer recipes, which I highly suggest you all check out if you haven't already seen it. And it can be found at yumyumsoups.wordpress.com. Following Dougie, we're going to hear from our final speaker, Phillip Hoffman. Phillip has been the artistic director of the independent imaging film retreat Film Farm since 1994. We heard about Film Farm earlier in the talk with Kim, who went on one of these retreats. It's a one-week workshop in artisanal filmmaking. Currently, Phillip also teaches at the Cinema and Media Arts Department at York University. And in his new film, Vulture, he uses several processing methods that include flower and plant-based hand processing. This film received the Kodak Cinematic Award at the Ann Arbor Film Festival in 2019. So brilliant to have you both, and I'll hand over to Dougie first.
Good. Okay, cool. Yeah, she already said everything that I wanted to say in my first 2, 3, 4 sentences. So my name is Dougie Brunner, coming from Berlin, Germany. Having made Super 8 films for over half of my, for more than half of my life, because I'm not yet 60, but I made more than like 31 years. I think I started filmmaking long time ago when I was studying art in Berlin. And it was these times when all the labs were still open. So it was just by coincidence that I should start my, what did I say? Making Super 8 films for more than 30 years now. I started it when the labs were still open. And here you see me. Here on the left, this is me with the 2 essential devices that I need for my life. It's my Nitzo Super 8 camera, and it is a cup of coffee. And I'm standing in the middle of the Berlin X airfield, Tempelhof, and on the right side you see I tried to make a logo for me which represents me when I was a bit skinnier then, with developer and fixer and with a measuring cup and with my spiral developing device. And here is a ready-made wonderful film in the end. So well, like I would say like 10 years ago I was a bit fed up of all this, with all this toxical developing stuff. I mean, when the labs all closed, like over 20 years ago, I was kind of forced to develop my films myself, which was not a problem at all, because I've always loved to splash around in my darkroom, making photos and negatives and all that stuff, especially black and white negative developing and photo print making, which was not a problem. But also I thought, okay, I'm going to do it myself now, since I'm also very much into expired material, which you have to, even if there are still labs around you, the labs will say no to your expired films because they might damage the whole developer in their machines, whatever. So I was quite familiar with developing films myself. And then like 10 years ago, I stumbled upon Cafenol, which was really a kind of mystery revelation for me, because up to then, I just didn't know that it could be so simple to develop films and don't pollute your environment even more than it is necessary. I think it's not at all necessary. So I was wow, what is that, Cafenol? And not forgetting to, okay, wait, so this Cafenol, I'm not so well arranged in my presentation. Okay, so everybody knows about this typical super valuable Cafenol recipe. You need washing soda, vitamin C, and instant coffee for that. And I checked it out, and I was very, very surprised how wonderfully it worked. And then really it was that time that the big Cafenol bug bit me, and I was totally in love with that. And I started to research what is it inside the Cafenol. What makes the silver salts react and turn into metallic silver, which will be then visible for the human eye and thus make a negative, black and white negative from it. And I found out it's the caffeic acid in the Cafenol. And then I thought, okay, it's the acid, it's the acid part in this. What about tannins in red wine? What about tannins in green and black tea? And what about so I started to do some more researches on the internet. And I must say, I'm not a chemist at all. I missed that at school. It never drew my attention. So I don't really have the any idea about what is it, but I found out it's the phenols or the phenols inside these, inside plants, inside beverages, inside spices and everything. And these phenols are parts that occur in mostly all plants. So when I found that out, I have to roll back here because, oh no, actually I wanted to, because I come from the part of, not the technical part, but I come from the part of entertaining. So I wanted to start my short 30 minutes showing you two films of mine. One very early one called Vergäpfelweilkilops, which is an agglomeration of 7 German words, 7 different flowers that I picked up. It's only 2 minutes long, that I picked up and made my first soup of developer. And it is a conglomeration of Vergissmeinnicht, Gänseblümchen, Apfel, Weißdorn, Kirsche, Löwenzahn, and Raps, which is Forget-Me-Not Daisy, Apple, Whitethorn, Cherry Dandelion, and Rape. So I would like to show you this film. And then afterwards, another film that is very dear to me. I made that last year. It is called Mjuk. Mjuk is the Swedish word for soft. And last year in the month of March, I was very lucky artist in residency in South Sweden, close to the Baltic Sea. And when just before I got there, I thought, okay, it's March, so it might be still winter time. And as I very much like to live and film locally, I thought, okay, sprouts are just beginning to come up from the earth, but what will always be around is moss. So I thought I would like to make a moss developer, and that's what I did. So please enjoy, please follow me to this little entertaining Vergäpfelweilkilops first. Oh, where is it? Wait, I have to go back and do it like this. Yes. You see, I love it so much. Me, just like the other cows, I'm grazing, and I'm grazing just like the other cows. I love it. It was so fun. Yeah, mostly all my first testing films, they came out to be tutorials, and I'm always noting down the recipe at the end of the film. And so this is Mjuk. Yeah, so this is how everything, wait, this is how everything started. Why does it not continue? Do I have to press something? Ah, yeah, okay, it goes on like this. So this is how it all started. So I was totally fascinated by everything that just grows around me. I tried every beverage. I tried mushrooms, as you see it now here, and like every berries and like beetroot and flowers and also fresh oranges, and there's nothing that could stop me. For example, spices work very well. I tried rosemary. I tried like as was General Trigon, or was it Ricardo? I don't remember. So one of you said that peppermint works very well. I tried fresh peppermint. I tried dry peppermint. I tried all kinds of spices like pepper and chili, and here you see kelp and seaweed, which works very fine. And I also tried some alcoholic beverages, like this is a special German chili brandy, which tastes really awful, but it makes a good developer. And talking about spices, I tried turmeric. Turmeric is really, like Joanna said, if it doesn't color your fingers, it's not a good tinter. And you can say the same from developer. If it doesn't taint your fingers, if it doesn't color your fingers, it is not strong enough. And that's what I found out. Curcuma turmeric is one of the strongest roots that grow. I mean, it increases your health if you eat it, and it's also a very, very super fine developer. So I tested more and more and more, and just knowing about, not really knowing what, wait, I wanted to show you something else, because I love these diagrams of chemical molecular systems inside the things. And I was just looking at them. I had not any idea of what it means. So here's curcuma, here is raspberry, and whatever theaflavin is, I don't know, but these are all phenols. These are all the powerful parts inside plants that make your developer work, and that also helps the plant, of course, to be strong, or to be colorful, or to smell yummy, or whatever. This is what I understand. I just see ho, and here shouted out loud. It looks like the molecule is shouting out oh, and this is what I find really funny. But I have actually no idea what it means. So what I wanted to say, knowing about phenols inside these plants, I tried to find the right recipe. First, I started with this caffeinol recipe, and I found out that all these flower soups, they need higher temperature because they are not so strong. Caffeic acid is really the strongest, the highest acid. You just need 20 degrees in 15 minutes, and that's okay. But for all these other soups, I would advise to use this basic soup recipe. So it's not me who found it out, but there are many other people. For example, Adrian Cousins, hello, I just saw you. And many more people. That's one thing what I love so much about this community, is that we are not greedy. We share everything. This is just what I love a lot. So the basic soup recipe says you make 500 milliliter of any berry or apple or fruit or whatever. Just press the apples or press the raw potatoes. It's a very fine developer, raw potatoes, or make a juice, make a tea. And tea means you collect some bark or leaves and chop them and pour boiling water over it and just let it simmer down until you have the temperature that you would like to have, which is it's best is around 30 degrees centigrade, of course, 30 degrees centigrade, and try 15 minutes, and you can make it hotter, make 35 degrees in 10 minutes. I just tried up to, I would say 38 degrees, because the hotter you get, at one certain point, the film emulsion starts to melt. I don't know exactly when it is, but I think it's after 40 degrees also. And then I mean, dealing with all these beautiful and colorful juices, the next question that arose inside me is, would the color be somehow would it be possible for the color to get into the film emulsion? So that's not only developing, but also tinting the film. And the answer is more or less no, because for me the explanation goes like this: the phenols inside the plants, they give the power to the developing, to transforming the silver salt. So there's no color, no power left for tinting the film. That comes afterwards, just like you heard from Joanna. But there are some exceptions, of course, and for example, all developers work very fine with Kodachrome. Kodachrome is actually a black and white film with 3 sensitized layers. It's all black and white. The color came later. And Kodachrome has something special. It has a yellowish in-between layer. So this would be too complicated to explain all about Kodachrome, but I think you know all that. Kodachrome is a little bit yellowish in itself. And if it is developed in Caffeinol or in any other developer, it seems to enhance the layer of the Kodachrome. And I got very, very bright orange and also very bright red results from developing Kodachrome. Here, this is in Kodachrome in seaweed. This is just fantastic. And so when I found it out that you get a bright red, it is of course very useful if you do the telecine afterwards. So I'm, for example, me and my films, I shoot everything on Super 8, but I have it transformed, I have it digitalized later, and I edit my films together with sound digitally. So for me, it's just fantastic to have the outcome of this Kodachrome eco-developed beautiful red or orange, and just flip it around while inverting when it's digital, and I have this wonderful blue. And some more examples is here, I didn't use a Kodachrome. I used the normal Tri-X black and white film and developed it in a turmeric juice. And you have this wonderful yellowish tint, which goes to this violetish blue after inverting. And also here down the Tri-X black and white film in rapeseed, in fresh rapeseed. So just was another Swedish plant that I found in early March. It was the first sprouts of rapeseed coming out of the soil, and I understood it that being a sprout coming out from a winter ice cold soil, you need a lot of power, and that explains to me that the phenols inside these superpower plants go into the developer and make a very strong developer. I find it very, very logical. Yes, so the answer was color. No, they don't really jump onto the film, but it doesn't matter. You can do that afterwards. And oh yeah, you see another wonderful black and what was Kodachrome, the 2 zombies drinking beer. There was another Kodachrome developed in Caffeinol, which gave it a oranges, yellowish tone, turning over to blue. And you see here the original film black and white negative in turmeric developer. It is really, really, really strong yellow. And this on the top right is strawberry developer, which makes I think that, yeah, that was also a Kodachrome, giving it a very bright red, shiny shine, and you have this greenish blue if you invert it. So that's it all about color. And just one little side trip, because Ricardo already explained a lot about reversal black and white developing, and I learned everything from him. So I first met him on the internet like maybe 8 years ago. I found his recipes and I just wanted to know, yeah, that's what I want to do. First developer Caffeinol, second developer Caffeinol, bleach made from hydrogen peroxide and lemon juice. And I got these wonderful images. And I got also these 20-second long film. And the fun thing about it is, if you listen carefully, you will hear the bubble of the bleach inside my developer Jobo tank pouring in. This is it. This up. Okay, so I'm almost done with this presentation. I think I can stop this now because I would. Yeah, I have no idea how many minutes are there left, but I don't really care. So you can just stop me. And I try to talk quicker and quicker. I would like to come from so these are all I would call it the outer world of developing and coming to the inner world of filmmaking. This is, how can I say, I love the combination of both. So I love how I make my short films is just carrying a camera with me. I try to do it like every day, or whenever I'm traveling, or whenever I'm invited somewhere, lucky artist in residency, or just visiting friends or whatever. I try to have my camera with me, and I try to have my eyes open, my ears open, my antennas upright, and not really having a script of the film, just being open to finding something while I'm walking around, because I am a strong believer of coincidence. I embrace coincidence because coincidence is full of creativity. I'm very, very amazed by it, because it happens when you just have this open attitude. You go outside, you will find little stories, you will find beauty in banality. That's what I like to say. This is what I'm on the hunt for, beauty in banality. I'm on the hunt for little stories, for little emotions, little people, or whatever, just capturing them, going outside. And then comes this ecological developing towards it. This gives it another dimension. Maybe it's the same dimension. So this is all one planet. It is, okay, I was in Sweden. I found this moss. I had a little dog there who was really stroking him. His fur was just like moss. So I put him inside the film. And you know what I'm saying? It's just grabbing what I can while I'm locally somewhere. So this is just the local working, taking in all the opportunities that I have while picking up the flowers, or picking up going to the next shop and buying local beer and drinking half of it and pouring the other half into the developer for my film. And this is, I find it fantastic. And people call me the Super 8 witch, or the Super 8 hippie, which is, I'm thankful for that. This is really okay to call me the Super 8 witch, because witches were old, wise women. And if I ever grow up to be an old, wise woman who has a lot of knowledge about plants and natural stuff, I would be very, very thankful for this universe. So let me see my scripts. What I wanted to don't miss to tell you is I work locally. Because I am part of my surrounding, of course. I mean, I share the molecules that are on and in me. They renew themselves, and all the other molecules outside. We share the same planet, we share the same air. So this is just natural for me to pick up here and there some berries and stuff and to put it inside my films. And because my film reflects my inner mood and the story that I wanted to say and my emotions. And if the film comes out to be good and attracts the listener and the viewer, so something jumps over to him and to her, and you know, this is my Super 8 hippie job that I'm doing, and I love it very much. And keeping the balance is another thing, because at some part I thought, okay, am I killing the flowers? And whenever I pick up a flower, I kind of kill it, but I'm not greedy, so I'm not killing the whole field. I'm just trying to let the flowers alive and trying, if I need tree bark, for example, tree bark is a very, very, very super good developer. It's very, very strong. And it is also very logical, because thinking about the phenols inside any plant makes the plant grow strong, makes the plant smell wonderful and attract bees or whatever, or makes the plant taste bitter and repel insects that the plant doesn't need. So this is all the little parts inside plants are powerful. Coming back to tree, don't scratch too much on one tree. Just wait until the tree wants to get rid of the bark and just collect the falling parts of the tree. This is okay. And once I must come to Phillip Hoffman. I hope I don't take your too much of your stories away. But I remember we shared one workshop almost 2 years ago in Berlin, and we really liked each other from the first minute, I would say, because we really saw, wow, we're sharing the same planet again. And he told me, hello, we were talking about this subject of taking too much from the plants. And he was telling me he had a discussion with a native Canadian shaman. I think it was someone who said, just take a quarter of a plant. And if you come to a tree, say hello to the tree, greet the tree, and maybe touch it and just ask the tree, can I have a little bit of your bark? And you will feel that it is okay. The tree maybe nods slowly with his twigs or whatever. And I remember that story. I liked it so much. And this is what I try to follow and to pursue, not to take too much and not to kill too much, because I'm part of the world, and the flowers are part of my world. And I think that's already it. And what is very important is play with food. That's really fun. Share your drink with your films and your photographs, and play with it. Spread recipes. Oh yeah, I have noted on spread recipe. This is one of the community that I love so much. You see my voice is coming quicker and quicker. I'm coming to an end. I love it so much that we share everything. I love it so much that we don't have a patent and don't tell the others or try to make money from it. I mean, try to make a little money from it is totally okay, because we are all poor artists. And but I like it so much whenever I'm in trouble and I don't remember, oh my God, how long do I have to have this bleach going on? I just chat with Adrian, I just chat with Peaceman, or with whoever I have in mind did the same stuff. And I really think I must try lichen, because I never knew how. I like the idea of Joanna so much, taking the lichen for tinting, and then afterwards taking it for developing, and then afterwards taking the rest stuff and making paper from it. And I thought, my goodness, is it so fantastic? We could also make photographic paper and then brush like anthotypes. Well, I'm so fascinated by anthotypes, of course, as well. So you can use this paper, and then you can use the goo of your remaining lichens and make an emulsion. This is all, wow, what a circle. That's it. And if you ever want to see some recipes, come to Yum Yum Soups. Is it the other way around? I don't know. It's yumyumsoups.wordpress.com. You can find all the recipes I ever tried. And another thing that I wanted to show you is, I mean, I didn't have time, but I'm also a pinhole photographer. I love pinholes. Go to my website, pinholedougie@wordpress.com, and find all my black and white pinholes that I, of course, developed all eco. That is it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dougie. You never cease to make me smile in your presentations. Lastly, we'll move on to Philip.
Yeah, there's been some talk of the film farm, thanks to Kim and her great new book. And actually, Ricardo visited the film farm as well, and Dougie may soon. And hopefully, you know, this can contribute to this community, this talk. So anyway, this is sort of how we might start our film farm.
This is gonna replace yoga.
Oh yeah. Stir the pot. Stir the pot. Stir it up. This. You were up and out of your seat like you were down all day.
We'll never speak of that again.
You know what? The much anticipated Tinting workshop has arrived. It's evolved over many years with many different participants contributing their own knowledge and expertise.
You know, this is sort of a way that we get the community together as 10 or 12 participants visit the farm. Well, it's usually every year, not during COVID. I'm here now in the winter darkroom, which is the basement of the house in Mount Forest. And I wanted to say that the people you saw there giving that workshop were Deirdre Logue, Rob Butterworth, and other, I would call them guides of the workshop, are Scott Miller-Berry, Christine Harrison, Tara Jean Long, and Janine Marchessault is also helps out with collaboration and contribution to every film farm. The idea is that you come to the workshop and you're not supposed to bring an idea. You're supposed to kind of react to it and find your project while you're there. I'm going to start here by making an acknowledgement because I'm very lucky to be in this place and doing these workshops here. And as is customary, I like to make the land an acknowledgement because the land we're on is actually the Saugeen Ojibwa territory. And that's part of Treaty 45. So I wanted to, 45 and a half actually. So I wanted to kind of acknowledge that and that we are lucky to be in this place. Let me share my document camera. Can everybody see that? So on the right, oh, actually in the center is a phytogram. We learned phytograms when Carol Dewing came to the film farm a few years back. The center one is one that's completed already. And that one, you can actually see some of the leaves have adhered to the emulsion. And that one is not fixed in such a great way, but I like the way it looks and I like the way the plants can be seen. The one on the right is a phytogram in the making. I've got a piece of glass on it. And I have dipped these plants in the solution of washing soda, what you wash your clothes with, and also vitamin C, ascorbic acid, some things that we've heard about already today. That one was done about 4 or 5 hours ago, so it's pretty well dry to the film. And the one on the far left has been just done more recently. So at the end of this talk, I'm going to dip them in fixer. Well, actually, Dougie showed me how to use salt, but we're not going to use salt because, as I said earlier, it takes about 12 hours. So we'll dip it into fixer at the end of this presentation and we'll see what they look like. Okay, I'm going to show some excerpts from Vulture, which is a more recent film of mine. And this is about 15 minutes, and I'm going to talk throughout it. The film is actually 57 minutes, so you know, you're getting bits of it here. Let me share screen again. This time, hopefully. The film starts with a painting by Homer Watson called Floodgate. And here the farmer is using technology to hold back the water so that he can plant his crop. And I think about technology and its rise through the 20th century and into the present. And part of what we're trying to do is find technologies, whether they be, you could call eco-processing technologies, something that's not as hard on the environment and not get us into the mess that we're in already. So I think that's part of, you know, this movement that Kim talked about in her book, trying to figure out our own place within this, within our work and within our practice. The whole film is a kind of homage to film. So it does start off with lab processed film. And I like that because it kind of shows the difference. Because as we move on into the film, we start to see the hand processed films with flowers and tinting with walnuts and so on and so forth. This is my neighbor's farm. It's a family farm. That means there's a handful of pigs, handful of cows, handful of horses, and a couple goats. There are goats, but they wintered over at our neighbors and stayed there. So they made friends, especially with the horses. They're constantly hanging out with the horses. You know, I think that's sort of partially what I was, you know, trying to look at. Spend time over 2 years with these animals. And seeing the interspecies communication, which you're going to see in some of the coming shots. To me, the animals are fenced in, and also the camera is fixing the animals in the frame. And but you know, what excites me is what the animals do, and you know, that's unpredictable. Dougie was talking about chance and unpredictability, and that's sort of maybe why I film as well. To me, every shot, this is a 100-foot roll of film run with an electric Bolex. So every shot was a kind of performance. I had to kind of figure out what to do, and whether it's pan or zoom or tilt or just not do anything. We drive by animals in the field, and we see them for a brief second. This time I have to spend with the animals kind of gives me, and I guess gives you, a look at the way they communicate with each other. I do love the pristine look of this, but I love the mess as well, that some of the future shots are going to show, the way that scratches adhere to the film, and I get different kinds of colors that's unexpected. The cow, they heard the Bolex. You know, the Bolex isn't a silent camera like a digital camera, and they would sometimes, I would start shooting even from the back of the field, and their heads would pop up, and so we had a whole kind of communication going in a way. I'm going to just move it ahead a little bit. So there was a hierarchy. This is on some level a kind of animal farm, and here's the entry of you know, the sort of top of the animal chain, at least here, and everyone is interested in the horses. And so as I said, I had to kind of figure out what to do, and you know, to me that's kind of an item of communication between animals as they all move over to the right and follow the horses. But why didn't I pan? I don't know why I didn't pan. But I'm glad I didn't. So this tree was shot with outdated film stock. Peter Metler, a filmmaker from Canada, a documentary filmmaker, gave me the stock. It was no good, supposedly. I got these wonderful colors out of them. Again, this is lab processed. We're still in that. As I said, this film follows all different types of film processing techniques. But this was color film, and you can see the dancing grain. I'm sure it's more like a tango with the zoom technology. It kind of turns the image into something else, and that's okay. It helps us see the grains, actually, if there is a kind of lagging of the image. And here, this is processed in black and white reversal, hand processing, and then tinted with walnuts. The walnuts were planted more than 25 years ago on the property, and they are now bearing fruit, the walnut trees, and I used them. I didn't expect it, but at that time I didn't know I'd be hand processing with plants and flowers. But the amazing colors that come from it, I don't know where it comes from. I think it's why I film. I think I film because I want to, you know, these little gifts that sort of come from being in partnership with the world, kind of working with these plants. And I think Joanna and Dougie and everyone has talked about that. Now this is hand processing with oregano. And this is Benjamin Wigley, came and did a residency, and he helped me with this, boiling down the oregano. I could then freeze some if I wanted and use it in the winter, as was already specified here in the talks. And now Bryn Wigley, his son, is going to talk.
When the vulture's flying in the sky, the lions look out for them because the vulture shows them where food is. There's some more vultures in Africa, aren't there?
Yes.
But here you've got turkey vultures.
Here we have turkey vultures. I've used child experts in my films before. Bryn talks about the way the vulture is sort of a signal to the lions. The lions see the vultures, and the lions know that there's food probably on the ground, because the vultures are, you know, picking up on the dead animals on the ground. This kind of cross-species communication is something Carol Dewing talks about in his article, Phytograms Rebuilding Human-Plant Affiliations. He talks about how plants and animals communicate with each other and suggests his phytogram workshops bring people together, sharing ideas and hopefully getting closer to the understanding of the plant world. I guess I'm trying to do that in this sort of 2-year project of trying to understand these farm animals and how they communicate. I'm going to read now from something I've been writing called Vulture Aesthetics. As a medium, film has often been likened to death. It is a moment frozen in time, as a French film theorist André Bazin put it. It is time mummified. Vulture Aesthetics relates both to my own work as a filmmaker and a teacher, but also to the work developed through the Independent Imaging Retreat Film Farm. A hand processing film workshop in Southern Ontario, nearly 25 years in the works. Such practices help to release film from its once and for all death grip on time, to bring film emulsion into the life world by connecting it to human bodies and the cycles of the earth. The emphasis on community and process cinema, at the Film Farm Retreat encourages artists to embrace the unexpected and environmental temporalities through film, plunging into celluloid through different chemical and biological and green processes. The film works made at the Film Farm Retreat are counter-archival, playful, and no doubt utopian in their drive for both collective making and singular undertaking. The idea of the vulture as a totem creature for this movement of process-driven filmmaking landed one day when I was walking on the film farm. We, the Film Farm Gang, had erected a kind of monument to the analog gods, which embodied all the film equipment that no longer worked and was irreparable. As I walked past this peculiar heap of steel and gears, I scared up a huge vulture who had been brooding on eggs at the foot of the recycled machinery. I suppose the sculpture had given the vulture some shelter, and this uncanny experience led me to ponder the similarities between filmmakers and vultures. Vultures hover over the land from high above with razor-sharp eyesight and keen sense of smell. Together, they stalk and share their decaying sustenance. Intense acid in their stomachs allow them to digest great quantities of their dead prey without falling ill. The vulture is the ultimate freegan. In great numbers, they stalk out their dead prey and share their finds. They are the ultimate recycler in their bid to make use of the decaying dead strewn over roads and fields. In a similar way, some experimental filmmakers bring back to life analog technologies and repurpose them for the present. In the shadow of the digital age, we share the gifts of the past knowledge for future development. Also in this making, acid-based fluids transform the silver halide crystals in the emulsion to metallic silver in the developing process and make the silvery magic of these images possible. So too, the vulture regurgitates acid from their stomach as a means to digest their decaying prey without succumbing to bacteria and disease, without getting sick. More specifically, at the Film Farm and throughout the micro-cinema universe, we follow the vulture's lead of working together to share things we find with those like-minded present or away, as we're doing here today. This act of sharing is not limited to the exchange of knowledge between people and communities and animals and plants, but also relates to the symbiotic relationship with the world, a kind of empathy with the natural forces. Allowing these omnipresent forces to be in partnership with the making of film ultimately puts us in beat with the world. That was written for the symposium put on by Labor Berlin and Film Institute of Berlin University, Film in the Present Tense.
Vultures live together and they don't fight, they help each other. Is that also okay?
I didn't know that.
when the vultures eat dead animals, they've got a type of poison in them, and it fights the poison in the dead animals so they don't get sick.
As I said, obviously I like the scratches. There's lots of them there. So this processed with fluid that's frozen. I think this was actually the oregano. This film was processed with magnolia blossoms. And it's amazing the sky that it could be color film. I use the computer to saturate, to bring more color out, and also to slow down and work with the image. So I just want you to see closely in the sky here, these kind of watercolor blotches that, again, I don't know how it happened. It's a gift. These kinds of gifts, as I said, are sort of the reasons why I make films. I make films to find something out. And rather than sort of knowing what I'm going to do and do it, I use the idea of process cinema, collecting, reflecting, revising as a way to make films. Let's take a look at the So the first thing I need to do is the film into water and take the leaves out. I'll leave on the first one that, or the leaves. These are mostly rose leaves and some rose blossoms. They're stuck to the film, so I don't want to rub them off too much because I like them being, the actual leaf being integrated into the film. There, pull the glass up, and it kind of might be worthwhile to just take a quick look at it now, because I mean, you could photograph it now as well. You don't have to put it in the fixer. So what I'm going to do is put this in the fixer, and we'll start to see some of the image come. Here's the other one. I'm going to just take it out now, put it in the water, and here's the second one. Probably not a good thing touching the fixer. Now let's take another look. I sort of see the phytograms in comparison to the rheograms as the soul. The phytogram sort of oozes the inner substance of the flower, all that caffeic acid, and you start to see something that doesn't actually even look like the plant. Definitely you see the edges. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Someone asked what film you are using there for your process.
Yeah, it's called ST8. Actually, Sylvan at Niagara Custom Labs here in Toronto gave it to me, a big roll. So I use it for all the workshops. It's 35 millimeter. So I find that working with 35 millimeter works quite well because it's easy to work with, and I can then like take stills of the images and animate them to create movement, or just, you know, have a still image of one leaf as like a photograph or a slide. Yeah.
Great. And then there are a few questions which might be which are relevant for a number of the speakers, I think. So Imagica is asking if you can think of any environmental influences, or I think he means kind of negative impacts, if you use these developing methods too much.
You're not going to cut all the plants on your garden to make developer, you know. You need to take care of that. It's like, I plant basil in my garden, so I cut some branches and leaves, and then let to flourish again, to cut this. And one thing that you have to have in mind, that even there are basil plants are high alkaline solutions, so you need to neutralize first before you dump it, you know. In my case, I use citric acid as a stop bath. So I mix my stop bath and my developer. It's acid and alkaline, so now it's neutral, and now it's ready to be discarded. But beside that, is a high alkaline solution. I cannot think on a negative thing of that kind of developers.
I guess what he might be trying to question is, if we were to try and make these things more commercial, you know, how would that play out? And I guess it's always a risk when something kind of becomes pushed to, you know, such an extent. But I think the thing about with these processes is there's such an array of plants that can be used. It's not just one thing that we're going after, you know. If it only relied on, you know, the lichens and seaweeds and things like that, then I would say, like, yeah, most definitely there's a kind of environmental implications. But I think it's, with so many things, it's just a case of diversifying the matter that we're using. Yeah, Kathy's said a note on that as well, that these processes take so much time and have so many levels of uncertainty that they don't lend themselves to commercialization.
I think the thing I would say about it is, I mean, that's the thing with being on the edges of commercial things. And that's maybe, you know, we all feel quite comfortable with that, and the way we're using things is small and the key. But the minute that you get into mass development of anything, you do. And, you know, so I suppose it's a question of how those things are grown. And I mean, for example, you know, lichen would not be suitable for mass production of it, I wouldn't think. But, you know, if you're using, I don't know, banana skins, or, I mean, you know, it's just like, you got to find the things that are, you know, byproducts of something else, I guess. But there was something I was just going to say, which I was kind of called on a bit at a Film Labs convention some years ago, when I was talking about using vitamin C, you know, sorbic acid, and someone was saying that it's incredibly, you know, production of vitamin C is incredibly wasteful of water. So, you know, factories are really, you know, so great that, you know, like using clementines, but if we were all using massive quantities of clementines, not eating them and just using the skins, you know, it's just about paying attention, isn't it? You know, there are just so many of us and so many people doing so much stuff all the time that we just have to, I mean, it's consuming. I think someone was saying, you know, about only using what you need, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just add a couple of things? A few years ago, I used to. Now I haven't been doing that. I used to gather water from the rain in a big buckets, so I could use for that was the thing I used to make my chemistry. But then. Sometimes you can't. It's not 100% eco-friendly, of course, but that like I said in the chat window, we use a lot of things that are far worse. About commercialization, I also agree that a few years ago, some small company tried to sell cathanol kits, and I think they stopped doing it because people that were doing cathanol, they were doing it by themselves. It's something that like Kathy said, it takes so much time, it takes so much effort that it's going to be really hard to make it industrial, to make it commercial, because it is in essence, it's something that it's very non-industrial. It's very artisanal, or should I say it? So that's it, I think. So I think it's that there's no big danger of that. I think that's it.
Yeah, lots of great kind of tips from people in the audience, such as using horse pea, which contains a lot of catechol and works as a developer too in pure form, as well as with vitamin C and soda. So I hope everyone's had a chance to kind of read all the amazing dialogue that's gone on the side. Also earlier there was a discussion about the kind of celluloid itself that the film exists on. And, you know, it's all well and good doing these environmental kind of developments of the film, but can we consider rethinking the film itself in a way? I've been personally doing some experiments with kombucha SCOBY, which a SCOBY is a byproduct of making kombucha, which is a health drink. And I've been kind of attempting to use it as an alternative to celluloid. At the moment, not in any kind of film form, just kind of printing on it with silver gelatin emulsion, but it's extremely strong and it has kind of lots of potential for it. Also, someone mentioned Washi Film, who's a company who makes paper-based films using Japanese papers. So if you're keen to try out a photographic film that isn't based on celluloid, I recommend checking them out. I'd just like to thank all of the speakers so much for sharing your incredible knowledge and being extremely generous. It's really amazing to see what you're all doing, and it's just been such a pleasure to hear what you've all been up to. And Dougie has a sparkler. I wish I had a sparkler.
Pleasure. Ouch.